Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are looking at a very technical but incredibly urgent piece of analysis. This isn't just a general look at the conflict, it's a specific forecast. It's almost like a red flashing light pointing to a time and a place. A place that one expert believes will be the war's next truly decisive battle. We're digging into the analysis from Mykola Melnyk. He's a former serviceman, a lieutenant, and now an expert with the Leviathan Analytical Group. And his assessment, which came to us through R4L's Donbas Realities Project, gives us a very concrete, very stark timeline. The battle for Sloviansk in 2026.
And that's exactly our mission for this deep dive. We have to really dissect Melnyk's central prediction here. He's not just saying the battle for Sloviansk is possible. He's saying it is inevitable, and that it will be the fight that defines control over the entire Donetsk region next year. It means we need to understand the terrain, the strategy, and what kind of response is even possible.
Okay, so let's unpack that. I mean, when you hear a phrase like decisive battle, we're not talking about small marginal gains. This is about a strategic breakthrough, something that could completely redraw the front line. So what's the first thing that jumps out at you in his framing?
Just how urgent the timeline is. Melnyk isn't just pointing to Sloviansk in 2026. He says the battle for its sister city, Kramatorsk, has, in a sense, already begun. He's framing these not as some far-off threat, but as the direct consequence of Russian momentum that's building right now further south.
And to really get the gravity of that, we need a bit of a geography lesson.
Well,
Could you lay out for our listener why this specific cluster of cities, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and all the towns around them, is so critical?
if you look at a map of the Donbas, this whole area works like a defensive anchor. You've got Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, and Pokrovsk. Together, they form what analysts call the Donbas Defense Belt. And this isn't just, a single trench line. It's a whole network of fortified cities, high ground, and key infrastructure that has held for years.
A network, right? So what happens if that anchor gives way?
The geopolitical consequences, well, it's profound. Think of it like a dam holding back immense pressure. If Russian forces can punch a hole here in this specific belt, they suddenly have the ability to flank Ukraine's entire defense system. They could bypass the current front lines and open up a path to control the whole of Donetsk province. Melnyk is basically warning that this is the last major geographical backstop.
And we have to place this military prediction against the political reality. The source material reminds us that President Volodymyr Zelensky has been very clear. Ukraine will never recognize Donbas as Russian territory, not legally, not practically. So defending this belt isn't just a military option, it's a political necessity.
Exactly. The defense of this area is a physical expression of that political will. If that defense belt were to collapse, Kyiv would be facing a massive political crisis on top of the military one. Melnyk's warning isn't just tactical advice. It's an integrated look at the war and the state's ultimate goals.
Okay, let's zero in on Sloviansk itself. Of all the cities in that belt, why does he single out this one as the site of the decisive battle? It seems to have both a symbolic and a strategic weight to it.
It really does. It's where the past and the present intersect. Symbolically, Sloviansk is part of the foundational story of this conflict. It was captured by pro-Russian forces way back in 2014, but then the Ukrainian military took it back a few months later. That recapture was a huge morale boost, a real turning point back then. Losing it now would be a massive psychological blow.
Right, and strategically.
Strategically, its role today is even more important. Sloviansk isn't just a city on a map, it's a vital logistics center. It functions as this critical rear hub, a nexus for roads, rail lines, supply depots, everything that feeds the entire defense along the Eastern Front. If you can choke that artery, you don't just weaken the defense belt, you essentially strangle the ability of Ukrainian forces to sustain their operations across the whole Donbas.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Melnyk connects the fate of Sloviansk directly to what's happening miles away, on the Pokrovsk front. How does progress in one spot start a timer for the other?
Pokrovsk is the immediate pressure point that's setting this 2026 timeline. Melnyk's analysis points to the current situation on the ground there. Russia controls about 80% of Pokrovsk, and they've nearly encircled its twin city, Myrnorad. This success points to a strategy of sequential conquest. The thinking is, once the effort tied down at Pokrovsk is freed up, that momentum is going to shift north, first to Kramatorsk and then to Sloviansk.
So the fight for Pokrovsk is basically setting the clock for the big one a year from now, but that's the what and the when. The really critical question is the how. Melnyk points to a very specific and I'd say sophisticated tactic. Russia is using a strategy of logistic strangulation instead of just, a brutal direct assault.
Yes, and it's highly effective. And frankly, it's cheaper in terms of manpower than fighting street by street in a fortified city. Melnyk notes that in difficult terrain, like the high ground around Pokrovsk and Mykola, a direct frontal assault is incredibly costly. So instead of trying to take the terrain, Russia shifted its focus to neutralizing its function.
Neutralizing its function. What does that look like on the ground? How do you control supply lines with fire without actually physically holding the roads?
It's a very targeted application of firepower and intelligence. They use surveillance drones, mostly, to pinpoint specific supply corridors, bridges, or other choke points that funnel logistics into the city. Then they just hammer those points again and again with artillery, missiles, guided bombs. The goal isn't even to destroy every single truck. It's to make movement so dangerous, so unpredictable, and so costly that a sustained defense becomes impossible. It completely disrupts the rhythm of supply.
So it's a long-term squeeze play, a war of attrition fought against supplies, not just soldiers. Is this new, or is it more like old siege warfare with modern tech?
It's an optimization of old principles. Sieges have always been about starvation. But now, instead of a physical wall, you're creating a ring of fire, a logistical blockade. Melnyk breaks it down into a deliberate two-phase approach. Phase 1 is achieving that logistical encirclement, controlling all the critical supply routes with fire. And only when the defense has been sufficiently starved out do they move to Phase 2, the actual physical encirclement, and cleaning up the strong points, which are now weak from a lack of resupply.
And that avoids the massive casualties you'd see from storming a prepared city head-on. You make it too expensive to defend long before you ever try to seize it.
Precisely. And this isn't just a theory. Melnyk points out this exact tactic is already being used successfully at Siversk, which is another key spot further north. The analysis is pretty clear that this perfected strategy will be copied and scaled up when the main effort shifts to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. It's a calculated strategy. It leverages firepower to conserve manpower.
So the picture looks pretty grim, especially given how well this strategy seems to be working. But Melnyk does offer a crucial counterargument. He says Ukraine can hold these cities, but only if there's a fundamental shift to what he calls a holistic, comprehensive approach. He warns against piecemeal solutions.
Yes, he's very clear that the status quo won't be enough. He says holding the line requires a packaged solution. Not just more troops, not just better weapons. It requires 4 distinct but interconnected actions that have to happen at the same time to create a synergistic effect. And they have to happen before that 2026 battle really kicks off.
Let's break those 4 down, because this is really where the operational planning meets political reality. What's the first pillar he identifies?
The first is strong defensive fortifications. And he means complex, layered defenses, not just shallow trenches. They have to be built fast, often under fire, across a huge area to counter the maneuverability Russia gains from its fire-controlled tactics. The challenge is the sheer volume of engineering, resources, and time that requires.
And then there's the people to man those defenses. That's the second point, right?
Correct. The second is effective force mobilization. The front is long and attrition is constant, so you need a steady stream of replacements. But Melnyk emphasizes the word effective. The troops have to be properly trained and equipped before they're sent to the front. Just saying you've mobilized a certain number of soldiers isn't enough. The system has to produce quality replacements throughout 2025.
Okay, fortifications, mobilization. Then you get to the industrial side of things.
Which is the third pillar, and it's vital for any kind of long-term survival. Defense industrial capacity must be ramped up, strengthened, made reliable. This is about lessening the dependence on the often unpredictable flow of foreign military aid. It means making your own ammunition, repairing your own vehicles, producing your own strike capabilities to hit back at their fire control strategy. That requires massive investment, and it takes years to mature, so there's a huge time crunch.
And the final point, the fourth one, seems to be the most difficult. It's about the human element command mistakes. What does he mean by that?
He says that command-level mistakes must be analyzed and corrected swiftly. This is maybe the hardest task of all, because it requires deep institutional introspection in the middle of a war. It means reviewing past operations, identifying repeated failures, and holding leadership accountable for bad strategy or poor deployment. It's not just a strategic challenge, it's about overcoming institutional inertia.
And the key is that all 4 have to happen at once. It sounds like an incredibly complex undertaking. You need political consensus, huge amounts of capital, and sweeping institutional change, all while the clock is ticking down, set by Russian movements at Pokrovsk.
That is the crux of Melnyk's warning. He specifically says, just saying that 3 brigades will be stationed there is not enough. The solution has to be integrated. I mean, think about it. Strong fortifications, Pillar 1, are useless if you don't have the industrial capacity, Pillar 3, to keep them supplied with shells. And that capacity means nothing without effective mobilization, Pillar 2, and sound leadership, Pillar 4, to direct the whole defense. If any one of those pillars fails, the whole thing comes down.
So we've covered the core intelligence here. A detailed military forecast that points to Sloviansk as the decisive battle of 2026, driven by a specific logistics-first strategy that's being perfected right now.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this?
Well, this analysis shifts the focus. It moves us away from just general predictions about the front line and towards specific high-stakes military preparation. The outcome of this predicted battle for Sloviansk seems to rest less on sheer brute force and more on Ukraine's ability to actually implement this very difficult, very comprehensive strategic package over the next year. It's a critical race against time. And we'll leave you with a final thought on that, one that connects back to the whole logistical strategy. Given all the constraints on resources, on time, the political sensitivities involved, which one of Melnyk's 4 big requirements do you think will be the most challenging to implement quickly enough to secure Sloviansk before 2026? Is it the fortifications, the mobilization, the industrial base, or correcting command mistakes? That decision, that choice of priority, is perhaps the real strategic test that Kyiv is facing right now.